All right, everybody, this is the 2016 Nismo 370Z. Now, the biggest thing that separates the Nismo from the regular 370 is this body kit. It really does a good job at aging the 370Z well. Top that off with these bigger exhaust outlets, and is that a brake light, not a brake light reflector, and the 370Z Nismo's kit really does look well. These little wide arches provide a nice wider wheel tire package on the Nismo 370Z. Combine that with a stiffer, lower suspension and an upgraded brake package, and that really is the core of the Nismo. Now, this thing has 18 horsepower more than a base Z and 6 pound-feet of torque, but what you're really paying for here is that suspension setup and these looks. I think the Nismo 370Z is a really good-looking car, but it does look its age. This car is from 2009. I was actually worried that I was going to be incredibly cramped in this car. I'm 6 feet, 275 pounds, and I actually found that I was not. And the reason for that is in large part to these fantastic seats. They do an incredible job. Looking now in the driver's seat, you see an incredibly clear instrument cluster, but one that is also incredibly dated, just like this gauge pod here, which is quite frankly filled with useless information. But the thing that dates this car the most, well, that's this right here. This navigation screen is from the early 2000s, and it shows. Now, remember, this car is a 2016 model, which makes this unacceptable, especially because it still is around in 2020. S mode for rev match downshifts was the first in 2009, and I found it interesting that this Nismo model, which is the top spec, had 3 blank buttons. But let's get these tremendous seats out on the back road and see how the Nismo 370Z does at speed. All right, let's get up to speed on the back road portion in the 370Z Nismo. Listen to this. So these muffler deletes really uncork the noise of this VQ engine. And some may not like it, but I think it sounds pretty good. The main thing this Z has going for it, the hydraulic steering. Because this car is 10 years old, let's remember it came out in 2009, hydraulic steering was still a thing. And thank the gods it still exists, because god damn it, this steering is really good. It's exactly what you want. So how's the chassis? Honestly, very good. This car is incredibly planted in all situations. Rarely does it get upset, even going over bumps, and it's a large testament to the car Nissan created, again, in 2009. How's the transmission? Well, thank you for asking. This transmission is incredibly notchy. It does require a little bit of force to get into certain gears. It's not effortless like, say, a Civic Type R or an S2000 or something like that, but it is incredibly direct, guys. You will never, ever misinterpret which gear you're going into. And Nissan was one of the first to do this sort of rev technology, this downshift rev match. Listen. And it works pretty well when you're driving it aggressively, like you would in a back road. So as we get to this second portion, we're gonna leave a little bit of room from this Nissan Rogue that was in front of us. Let's get going. Okay, so as we get into the twistier bits, this is really where the Z shines. And this is why, even though this car is 10 years old, it still hangs. Does it have a V8? No. But it has hydraulic steering, incredible brakes, and a really well-suited chassis. I mean, this thing weighs 3,400 pounds, and you wouldn't really tell. 350 horsepower, do a really good job. Listen to that. This is a really good sounding car. I wonder if that drone's gonna hit on the highway. These seats are incredible at holding you in place. This sound is dynamite. These brakes are solid. The clutch and transmission combo, while not Honda slick, are incredibly well sorted. But let's see how this fire-breathing, track-oriented machine does on the highway, because I have a feeling it could be where the car falls a little flat. Let's see. Let's take a little highway ride. All right, as we do for cars that sound and look the part, we're gonna include the on-ramp portion for this highway drive. So we're gonna toss this thing in third gear. You can hear it, it's getting ready to pounce. And we're gonna take a right and get on the highway and do a little pull up the ramp. Let's see what she's got. Here we go, rolling. That sound. That sound is good, guys. Think what you want about the VQ. This is a good sounding car, but enough of that. How do we do at speed? So right now we are cruising at 70 miles an hour, which is a common speed for people that go on the highway. And how does the Z do at that speed? Well, this one, it's a little loud. I mean, the muffler delete, while it isn't the end of the world at 3,000 RPM, which this car cruises at 75, it is definitely a little louder than probably a stock Nismo 370Z would be. But that said, the suspension, wow, that was weird. The suspension tuning of this car is actually, I'm really impressed with it. While it is definitely on the stiffer side, it's fine. I mean, I'm cruising, like I said, at 70 miles an hour, and I can hear the tire noise. I mean, these wheel tire package is pretty big, and I can hear some things outside of the car, but from a comfort level, these Recaro seats do an incredible job at keeping me in the seat, and I'm not jealous of these over my Civic Type R seats, but they're good ones nonetheless. And I think that's really important to have in a car like this. Something that you can cruise on the highway to go to the beach or something like that, but also really dice up in the back roads and on a track day. And the 370Z is really a good balance of both. It is a GT car in that sense. It isn't out of place on the highway like, say, the Porsche that we tested last week kind of was because of how aggressive the car was modified. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I thought the car was going to fall flat on its face. I thought it was going to be really loud. I thought I was going to rue the day or excuse me, get really excited for the day where I'd be back in my Civic on the highway. But that's not the case, guys. This car is actually incredibly capable as a highway cruiser. But does it fall flat around town? Is that the chink in the 370Z's armor? Let's see. You guys came for the noise, right? So let's start with that. I can't get over it. Woo! Takes up the whole cabin. It kind of shakes a little bit. It's so loud. But anyway, okay, I'll drive like a sir for the rest of this around town portion and shift it around 2 to 3K like you would. So how does the 370Z do around town? Well, I think we found what is wrong with the 370Z Nismo and what you should consider if you are thinking about buying one of these cars. In the around town portion, the features and how the interior feels really come to a head. They're things that you can focus on. They're things that are really important to you. And in the around town portion in this car, you really start to see where the 370Z shows its age. Now, in the back roads, I don't really care about this infotainment system because the steering, the sound, the transmission, the horsepower, the torque, those are the things that my mind is really concerned with. And even on the highway portion, all I really care about is the sound and the sound system and the suspension tuning and how the car feels on the highway. I'm not even really concerned with the interior and the features like that. But around town, that is where these things come to a head. So how are they? They're 2009. This this instrument cluster, while incredibly clear, I mean, you have a huge rev limiter right in front of you, you have your speedo on the right, and you have fuel and temperature on the left. It's dated, it's 2009, there's no ways about it. And then this center stack, I almost wish that this 370Z Nismo did not have the navigation. And the reason why I say that is because these 370Zs, if they didn't come with navigation, it's just a big storage compartment. And that, to me, would be more valuable than this 2009 Nissan infotainment system. The graphics are 2009, the capabilities are 2009, and it is just very, very dated. And in a car that we're sitting in that's from 2016, in those 7 years, none of that changed. And Nissan was able to get away with that because the driving dynamics of the car are things that people yearn for. You really want something with hydraulic steering. You really want rear-wheel drive. You really want a naturally aspirated motor, and this car gives you all of that. But what it doesn't give you is tech. It doesn't give you the comfort that you need during your day-to-day commute. The things that you're used to with modern cars that are 2016 and above, it just falls flat on its face. So, if you're willing to swap those things out to modern equipment, then I would consider a used 370Z, no doubt about it. But if you're not, if you just want the car as is and you want it to be a daily driver, you gotta remember those things, because guys, let's talk about its competition. Now, a used 370Z Nismo like this, what I would call the second gen 370Z, the one with this styling, not the outlandish wing and body kit, these cars run for around 30 grand on the used market. What else can you get for 30 grand? You can get a Civic Type R. You can get an STI. You can even get a Camaro SS and a Mustang GT. If you want to go German, you can get an M240i for around that price as well. So what does the Nismo 370Z provide that none of those cars do? Well, it provides analog. This car is a call to the early 2000s. This car is hydraulic steering, an involved transmission, NA power, rear-wheel drive, a nice, well-suited, sorted chassis. But what the other cars provide, amenities. Even if you opt for the Camaro, even if you opt for the Mustang, you get luxuries. And you get a V8. If you opt for the BMW, you get a twin-turbo 6 rear-wheel drive and the luxuries. The driving feel of this car is a call to the late 90s and early 2000s. I mean, this car is more 350Z than it is modern-day car, right? And there's something refreshing about that. You know, as we get to the era of car where Dodge is putting out 3-row SUVs that run 11 5/4 miles, cars like this that, you know, might not be the fastest around, but provide immense amounts of driving feel, kind of get lost and forgotten. People forget how good these 370Zs were, and it's because of this around town portion. It's because of the fact that this car doesn't have the amenities and the Bluetooth and the Apple, well, it has Bluetooth, but the Apple CarPlay, the Android Auto, the blind spot, the things like that, the configurable cluster. You know, it's because this car doesn't have those things that it gets lost amongst the eyes of a lot of people. But if you're willing to put up with those, or you add them yourself, you replace these 3 pods up here with oil pressure, water pressure, and temp instead of battery voltage and time, or you replace this center stack with a modern one that gives you CarPlay, then you got a dynamite car in your hands. You got a car that has been well sorted. And I mean, hell, they build these things really well now. There's no creaks and rattles in here. And yes, there is some scratchy soft plastic on the dash, but it's assembled very well. I mean, hell, they've been putting these cars together for over 10 years now, so I would hope so, but they do. The one thing that there is to note, the one big complaint that I have that is not tech related is the rev match downshift. Now in the around the town portion, a rev match downshift like what the Civic provides makes driving a manual car easier, right? Because it's matching those downshifts for you. You can really, you almost can forget that you're driving a manual. The only thing you have to remember is to press that pedal on the left when you're rowing your gears. The car does the rest for you. And Nissan was one of the first to do that with the Z. And like I talked about in the backroads portion, it really does a good job when you're pushing it at rev match downshifting, but where it falters is around town. So
So what a lot of manual drivers do, I mean, I'm guilty of this, so maybe it's just me, but let me know in the comments if you're similar, is when you put the car in neutral, I sort of wiggle the stick a little bit, just to really remind myself that the car is in neutral, right? You guys do the same? I'm not alone, right? So, someone tell me I'm not alone. But when you do that in this car, because the technology was new in 09, they didn't account for that. So when you clutch in, put the car in neutral, did you hear that rev? It thinks that you're gonna instantly go into that next gear. And if I push the gear lever to the left and down a little, but not in a gear, it revved like it was gonna go into second, but that's not what I wanted to do. So this car tries to anticipate your movements, and if you do the wiggle, it'll rev to the moon because it'll think you're going to second. So that's something to note. Keep in mind, unlike the Civic, you can turn that feature off. You can turn off the rev match downshift, which is nice, but it is something to note. So that brings us to the end of our 370Z Nismo review. I do truly like this car. Would I take it over its competition? Probably not for $30,000. I would wait for when these things go around the 20K mark. That would be a sweet spot for me for this car. But if you wanted to get one right now, I wouldn't stop you. They're a solid machine. And a call to the days where you had to make inputs to get an output instead of cars with trick ELSDs like a Camaro SS1 LE or trick diffs and all that stuff like my Civic provides. This thing is a call to the old days where a viscous LSD and some naturally aspirated power were all you needed to have some fun. Thank you guys for joining me today. I truly appreciate all the support that you've given to this channel and continue to give to this channel. And if you like this video, shoot me a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. As always, guys, drive safe and be safe.